On the 4th of May 2026, the North American grid watchdog sent out a rare warning, not about a blackout, not about a storm, not even about a power plant failing. The warning was about data centers. More than a gigawatt of computational load had dropped off the power system in seconds. The kind of sudden swing grid operators were not used to seeing from electricity demand. One moment the load was there, then it was gone. That is not how we usually talk about AI. We talk about chips, models, tokens, breakthroughs, the race to build something smarter. But underneath all of that is a much older machine, the electricity grid. And now that machine is starting to feel AI. This is what it looks like when a technology that sounds weightless runs into something physical. Power lines, transformers, substations, permits, queues. AI has found its first hard limit. Not intelligence, not chips, electricity. Start with what a data center actually is. Strip away the word cloud, and a data center is just a building full of computers. Servers that store data and run software, kept cool, kept powered, kept online. Every search, every email, every video, every AI prompt resolves inside one of these buildings somewhere. For most of the internet's life, that was a quiet, almost boring business. What changed is what the computers are doing. A traditional data center is built for many small jobs at once, serving web pages, routing messages, storing files. An AI data center is built for one very heavy job, training and running the large models behind tools like chatbots and image generators. That work runs on GPUs, graphics-style accelerator chips, packed in by the thousands and pushed near full power for hours or days at a time. So the simplest way to picture it, not a warehouse of filing cabinets that occasionally light up, but a building full of furnaces that run flat out. Same category of building, completely different appetite for electricity. Data centers are not new, and neither is worrying about their power use. A decade ago, US data centers ran on roughly 58 terawatt-hours of electricity a year. Real, but a rounding error in a national grid. For years, something remarkable happened. The internet exploded, but data center power stayed almost flat. Computers got far more efficient about as fast as demand grew, and the two roughly cancelled out. That truce ended with AI. Between 2017 and 2023, US data center power demand more than doubled, and the cause wasn't more web pages. It was the arrival of AI servers. By 2023, US data centers were using about 176 terawatt-hours, roughly 4.4% of all the electricity in the country. The quiet, flat line had turned into a steep climb. The reason is a shift in the kind of computing underneath. Serving a web page is light work. Training a frontier AI model means running enormous clusters of specialized chips at full tilt, continuously. The same industry that spent 2 decades getting more efficient suddenly started demanding more power. A lot more, very fast. Here is the physical reason AI is so power-hungry. Inside a data center, computers sit in racks, tall cabinets about the size of a fridge. A conventional rack of servers draws something like 10 kilowatts. A single modern AI rack, packed with GPUs, is rated at around 120 kilowatts, with some deployed units pulling 130. That's not a little more. It's roughly 12 times the power in the same footprint, and the roadmap points higher still. Next-generation AI racks are being designed toward several hundred kilowatts each. Then there's heat. Chips that draw that much power get hot, and they have to be cooled, or they fail. Cooling alone can account for 30 to 40% of a data center's total energy. The industry has a number for this overhead, PUE, power usage effectiveness, and the industry average has been stuck around 1.56 for years, meaning for every unit of power doing useful compute, you spend roughly half a unit again on cooling and overhead. The best new AI facilities using liquid cooling push that down toward 1.05. But efficiency gains have largely plateaued, even as the chips get hungrier. Put it together, thousands of high-draw chips run near 100% utilization, plus the cooling to keep them alive. That's why an AI campus doesn't sip power like an office. It pulls like a small industrial plant, steadily, around the clock. And that steady, enormous concentrated load is what lands on the electricity grid. Now scale it up. Across the United States, data centers accounted for roughly half of all the growth in electricity demand in 2025, more than homes, factories, and electric cars combined. For most of the last 20 years, US electricity demand barely grew at all. AI restarted the meter. The trajectory is steep. The LBNL projection has US data centers reaching somewhere between 325 and 580 terawatt-hours by 2028, between about 6.7 and 12% of the entire country's electricity. Globally, the picture rhymes. The IEA estimates data centers used around 415 terawatt-hours in 2024, about 1.5% of world electricity, and projects that roughly doubles to around 945 terawatt-hours by 2030, with the AI-specific slice growing several times over. That 2030 figure is close to the entire electricity consumption of Japan. This is why the cold open matters. When a grid reliability body issues its highest level alert over data center loads, it's because this demand doesn't spread evenly. It clusters. Northern Virginia. Data Center Alley already runs on it. Data centers take around a quarter of the whole state's electricity today, and one analysis projects that could climb to roughly 40 to 60% by 2030. The load shows up faster than the wires, transformers, and power plants that feed it can be built. That gap, fast demand, slow grid, is the whole problem. The conflict isn't villains versus victims. It's a timing mismatch with real consequences. A data center campus can be announced and built in a year or two. The grid it plugs into runs on a different clock. New transmission lines, substations, and generation take many years tangled in permitting and interconnection queues, so the demand arrives first and the supply scrambles to catch up. That creates three pressure points. First, reliability. Regulators warn that giant computational loads can drop on and off the system in seconds, and the grid has not historically experienced simultaneous load losses of this magnitude. Unlike a power plant, a data center hasn't traditionally had to share data about how it behaves on the grid. Second, cost. When utilities build out to serve data centers, the question becomes who pays? The tech companies or ordinary ratepayers whose bills creep up. One estimate even ties data center demand to a small but measurable bump in core inflation. Third, place. Some towns get the jobs and the tax base. Others get the higher bills and a substation they never asked for. So the political fight isn't really should AI exist. It's narrower and harder. Who gets the power, who waits in the queue, and who pays for the upgrades? The honest counter-argument is not that the demand is fake. It's that the alarm is overstated and there's real evidence for it. Start with the gap between announcements and reality. A large share of planned data center capacity never gets built. Deals reportedly fell more than 40% in late 2025, and only about a third of announced capacity is actually under construction. Megawatts on a press release are not megawatts on the grid. Then there's flexibility. Grids are sized for a few peak hours a year. The rest of the time there's slack. Data centers can increasingly shift or curtail their load off those peaks, and many are bringing their own power, generating on-site instead of leaning entirely on the grid. Utilities are also writing large load tariffs designed so that data centers, not existing customers, carry the cost of their own expansion. And despite years of alarming headlines, real US electricity prices are actually down about 6% since 2010. Data centers rank well below fuel costs and aging infrastructure as a driver of bills. Add steady efficiency gains. Each chip generation does more compute per watt. And the scariest forecasts may simply bend. It's a serious argument, and parts of it are right. The AI breaks the grid framing is too dramatic, But notice what it concedes. Even the optimists agree the strain is real where it's concentrated. The interconnection queues, the transformers, the single sites swinging gigawatts. The disagreement is about scale and speed, not about whether the choke point exists. The easy version of this story is that AI is going to break the grid. That is too clean, too dramatic. Grids do not usually collapse because one industry gets hungry. They bend, they delay, they ration, they reprice, they force choices into the open that used to stay buried in planning documents. But the opposite argument is too comfortable as well. That this is all just another panic cycle, that efficiency will take care of it, that the market will quietly smooth the edges. Maybe some of that happens, it probably will. Still, our view is this: AI has found its first physical limit, not intelligence, not chips, electricity. For the last few years, the AI race has been described in almost weightless language, models, parameters, cloud capacity, compute. But behind that language sits an old, slow, very physical system: power stations, transformers, substations, transmission lines, permits, interconnection queues. A data center campus can be announced in a quarter. A grid upgrade can take years. That mismatch is the choke point. The risk is not that the whole country suddenly runs out of electricity. That is the wrong picture. The risk is local, lumpy, and uneven. Northern Virginia feels it before other places. Some towns get tax revenue and construction jobs. Others get higher bills, delayed connections, or a substation they never asked for. Some AI capacity gets built, some waits in a queue, some brings its own power, some simply does not happen. So this is not a doom story, it is a bottleneck story. AI may still scale, but not in the clean, frictionless way the industry likes to describe. The next phase will be decided less by who has the best model, and more by who can get enough power in the right place, fast enough, without making everyone else pay for the shortcut. 3 plausible versions of the next decade, and the real future is probably a blend. 1. The build-out wins. Utilities, tech giants, and governments pour capital into generation and transmission. The queues clear. Power keeps pace. AI scales roughly as the bullish forecasts imagine, and the grid strain becomes a solved engineering problem, at a cost, paid in capital and, in places, in higher bills. This is the path where the demand curve is met head-on. 2. The curve bends. Efficiency, smarter cooling, demand shifting, and the gap between announced and built capacity do most of the work. AI keeps growing, but its power appetite grows slower than feared. The 945 terawatt-hour figure turns out to be the top of the range, not the base case. The crunch quietly deflates, and the headlines move on. 3. Power becomes the map. The bottleneck holds, and electricity, not chips, decides the geography of AI. Compute migrates to wherever power is cheap, abundant, and fast to connect, places with spare generation, friendly permitting, or the will to build. Some regions win the data center economy, others are priced or queued out. AI's growth continues, but it's routed by the grid, the way water is routed by terrain. The most likely outcome isn't a clean win for any one of these. It's a slow negotiation, AI advancing where the power is, stalling where it isn't, and forcing a conversation about the grid that most countries have put off for decades. Go back to that warning from May 2026. It was not really about one fault or one cluster, or even 1 gigawatt disappearing from the grid in seconds. It was the grid saying, in its own technical language, that it can feel a new kind of load arriving, a load that is huge, concentrated, fast-moving, and not always visible to planners until it is already asking to plug in. That is the part the AI story often leaves out. Every breakthrough headline has a shadow behind it. More compute means more buildings. More buildings mean more power. More power means wires, transformers, cooling systems, land, permits, and people arguing over who pays. The cloud was never really a cloud. It was always somewhere. And now that somewhere needs electricity on a scale the old system was not built to absorb quickly. So the question is no longer just how far AI can go. It is where the power comes from, who gets it first, who waits, and whether the grid can move fast enough to keep up with an industry that does not like waiting.